We are live and direct in Manchester, New Hampshire, counting down to who will be the GOP nominee to face Barack Obama and save the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, I am the chairman of the Common Sense Club, Scott Hennon, live from the Radisson in downtown Manchester, New Hampshire. And we start with Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, who is, of course, stumping for his father, Ron Paul. How are you, Senator?
Very good. Glad to be with you.
Good to see you. How do you feel about your dad's chances here?
We're excited about it. I mean, you get here and the excitement is palpable. I mean, the first rally we had at the Nashua Airport, 1,000 people overflowing. We were in Meredith yesterday, overflowing. The owner of the inn there said it was the largest crowd he's ever seen in 20 years of politics.
Your dad, I've said many times, ought to be given a medal for the education he's done on just simple finance and what it takes to reform our government in this country, especially for the other candidates. Fantastic. The rap is always the foreign policy thing. Is that fair?
Well, it's different, and so I think it shocks people a little bit to think that, oh gosh, this sounds different than what I've been hearing. I just want to bomb Iran into submission. And I think what my dad is saying is that something that's very constitutional, the president only makes unilateral decisions when we're under immediate threat of attack. Otherwise, he's supposed to go to Congress and say to Congress and to the American people, I think we should have war with this nation, and we declare war. That's what we did in World War II, have not done it since, and we've had a lot of disunity since then.
You were doing a roundtable focus group with Frank Lunch last night on Fox News Channel, and the audience there, they asked the question, who's with Ron Paul on fiscal issues? All the hands went up.
Right.
Who's with Ron Paul on foreign policy? One or two hands go up. What do you think those folks aren't getting or aren't hearing about your dad's policies?
I think on the Iran issue is where it's really been misunderstood. My dad does not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. He thinks if they had a nuclear weapon, it could destabilize the Middle East. But he also thinks that should they get a weapon, there are questions about how we respond and what do we do. Could we contain them the same way we contained the Soviet Union? And people say, oh, well, that's so far outside the mainstream. The previous three heads of the U.S. Central Command, General Zinni, General Abizaid, and Admiral Fallon, all have said they're concerned about a preemptive strike on Iran, that the unintended consequences could be worse than what happens if we don't. Also, interestingly, people in Israel have mixed opinions on this. The head of the Mossad doesn't want Iran to have nuclear weapons, obviously, said 3 days ago that we need to be careful about always defining this as an existential threat to Israel, because if we do, we trap ourselves into one response. This is from a guy who obviously loves his country and lives in Israel and knows the threat Israel lives under, but he says maybe we could contain Iran also, because maybe if there's a preemptive attack on Iran, it solidifies the mullahs, because then everybody in Iran is going to hate everyone else outside Iran that's attacking, and they're going to say the mullahs will keep us safe. Instead, the mullahs right now, 50% of Iran or more is pro-Western. If we can let there be a rebellion there and somehow contain Iran until there is a rebellion to overthrow the mullahs, I think we have a better shot.
All right, we have some colleagues here of mine on Radio Row that would like to ask questions as well of Senator Paul. And first up is who?
How do you do? Lisa Lexa, WFAS. Hi, Senator Paul. Last Saturday, President Obama signed for the first time the Defense Appropriations Bill that permitted indefinite detention without trial for people that were labeled enemy combatants, and also expanded for the first time the jurisdiction of the TSA over buses and trains with sniff dogs everywhere. Your father, Ron Paul, is the only one talking about this expansion of federal power. How likely is it that putting this on the agenda will begin to turn it back?
Well, we had a healthy debate in the Senate over this, and I'm opposed to U.S. citizens being sent to Guantanamo Bay. I asked Senator McCain about this. Could you be accused, not convicted, but accused of an association with terrorism and be sent to Guantanamo Bay? And the answer scared me. The answer was yes. Why does it scare me? The FBI recently put out a bulletin on who you need to report as suspicious for terrorism. People who are missing fingers on their hands, people who have stains on their clothing, people who like to pay in cash, people who buy large amounts of ammunition, people who buy meals that are ready to eat and have them in their house for storage. These are people that you're supposed to report to your government as potential terrorists. If that's true, there's a whole lot of America that could be on a list that is accused of an association with terrorism who doesn't get a trial by a jury. For 800 years, we've been evolving to have due process. It's really important. And what Americans need to realize is that the worst people in our society, someone accused of murder, rape, pedophilia, people we all want to lock up, we give a trial by jury because we don't want to lock up innocent people. It's very important, and I don't want to give it up.
All right, next question.
Gary Duff, WRHU News. Gary Duff, WRHU News. Hi, Senator Rand Paul. I want to ask you quick. We're in New Hampshire. We're talking about electability and who's going to be able to win the nomination. I want to ask you, we've heard people like Tracy Davis, who's a former speechwriter for H.W. Bush, say that your father is not electable. If he doesn't win the nomination, I'm wondering, do you feel he's laying groundwork for you to possibly follow in his footsteps?
I think electability, a lot of pundits, when you talk to them, say to be electable, you need to get outside of your party and attract independents. We won the independent vote 3-1 in Iowa. We're winning the independent vote in New Hampshire. So I think that shows a broad appeal outside your party. The ideas of libertarians and conservatives do appeal to some liberals on civil liberties and the idea that you should have a trial by jury, that the Fourth Amendment says a judge should have a warrant, and it also appeals to some conservatives too. And so I think the appeal is very broad and that we have a real chance. I think our best influence is within the Republican Party, and that's my advice.
Are you going to take that mantle, though, from your dad, you think, at some point and run for president?
I'm not sure you actually take something, but I think that I want to be part of the national debate. I want to change the country for the better. I think we have a day of reckoning that's coming, and the day of reckoning is a debt crisis in our country, and I'm not alone. The senator here, Kelly Ayotte, has talked about the European debt crisis. Senator Tom Coburn does. Senator DeMint does. Senator Moran.
We don't have much time either, do we? We don't have much time. Next question. Go ahead.
Talk Radio.
Sorry, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Tony Say from Talk Radio News Service. It's clear that your father probably has the most intense support of any of the candidates. He's coming in a strong third in Iowa. Looks like a second here in New Hampshire. But presuming he doesn't get the nomination, is he going to be as committed to trying to get Barack Obama to be a one-term president, and will he work hard to get that intense support that he is receiving and transpose it to the potential nominee of the party?
I think obviously we want to win, and we're in this to win. We want to get the Republican nomination. Everybody has to always know that there's always a chance you don't get the nomination. If you don't, I think you want to influence your party. For example, I think during some of the years when we were in charge, 2000 to 2006, 2008, that we lost our way. We didn't cut spending. We expanded Medicare to include Medicare Part D. We doubled the size of the Department of Education. We want to have influence on what the Republican Party is, and that the Republican Party truly believes in smaller government, that we're not just going to give lip service because we want to be in charge of the Democrats. We want, if Republicans win, for it to make a difference, and that we nominate someone who's a clear contrast to President Obama.
Hi, Senator Paul. Jim McCain, News Director, WNTK Radio in New Hampshire. Glad to speak with you. I just wanted to ask you, does it frustrate you at all when your father appears in so many different interviews and on the debates, he consistently gets asked about running as a third-party candidate when he's still second in New Hampshire right now and had a strong showing in Iowa?
Yeah, I think it does frustrate him, and we're in the top tier of the primaries. We essentially tied for first in Iowa. We're in a close second, and we're hoping for an upset victory here in New Hampshire. So he sees it as sort of a little bit of a, why are they asking me this when I'm trying to win the Republican nomination? So he does get a little bit frustrated by the question.
All right, next up, your name, sir?
Dan Mitchell, WKBK Radio here in Keene, New Hampshire. On my way between Keene and Manchester, the greatest amount of support I thought I saw was for your father, given the signs, people standing out in freezing weather with the bullhorns, yelling at people as they pass by in traffic. What do you account for this sort of an outpouring of support compared to some of the other candidates that seem to have much less as far as grassroots campaigning in the state is concerned?
Well, I'd say it's a phenomenon. It's just amazing. We were in Meredith yesterday, and the owner of the hotel says he's had presidential candidates come to his hotel for 20 years. It's the biggest crowd he's ever seen. We had probably 1,000 people with 100 people in the hallway, 100 people standing out in the parking lot that couldn't come in. It's a lot of young people. When you look at the poll data, my dad's winning the youth vote overwhelmingly. He's also winning the independent vote. Our best chance for victory here in New Hampshire would be big snowstorm and big independent turnout.
All right, next question. Steve Gill, my man.
Steve Gill from Nashville, Tennessee. Good to see you again, Senator. A lot of folks are talking about whether your father, if he doesn't get the nomination, will run as a third-party candidate. And some people are talking about targeting you in your Senate race in Kentucky if he runs as a third-party candidate.
Now, that's just not nice.
Are you concerned? Hey, Louisville, Kentucky, and Kentucky basketball games aren't nice. Yeah. Are you concerned that he will run as a third-party candidate? Or are you concerned about how it would affect you if he does?
I don't think he will, and he said, he doesn't have any intentions, and that sort of leaves open this small door, and so people keep asking. But I really don't think he's going to. We're very close to winning the Republican nomination. At least have a shot at it, and we're trying very hard. I've also said that the Tea Party that I was part of and the libertarian conservative movement within the Republican Party has more influence in the party than outside the party. Outside the party, we'd be 5, 10, if we did really well, 15% of the vote, but we would take away Republican vote, and I think it would assure the reelection of the president. None of us want that. We want a new president, and so I don't think it's going to happen. And I've said I'm going to support the Republican nominee.
Final question for you, Senator, I want to ask you is about the mantle of Ronald Reagan. We're going to break here, so I have 30 seconds for this, but who deserves the mantle of Ronald Reagan in this GOP battle?
I think it's without question. Ron Paul was one of only 4 U.S. congressmen to support Ronald Reagan when he ran against Ford. That's when it wasn't likely for him to win. Ronald Reagan repaid him by coming and campaigning for Ron Paul. So I think there's no question. Ronald Reagan said, get rid of the Department of Education. Is there anybody else on the stage? Most of the other Republican nominees wanted to double the size of the Department of Education. Ron Paul's the only one up there saying eliminate the Department of Education. That's Ronald Reagan incarnate.
Great point. Thanks, Senator. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
God bless you. Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, our guest on the Common Sense Club, and he's got in a show live and direct from Manchester, New Hampshire. Don't go away.